Okay, Shabbat Shalom. Welcome to United Israel World Union. This is our Sabbath morning Torah study. It's so good to be here with you this morning. So thanks for joining us on this beautiful Sabbath. But I did want to say a couple of things by way of announcement. Number one, I have a new grandson by the name of Owen. It's our sixth grandchild, the 12th descendant of Bridget and I, so I like to add that in. So, but anyway, thank you for your prayers, and I went to see him this morning. This morning is his first Sabbath, so I had to get a little time with him and sing a few songs to him and hold his hand and things like that. So it was a beautiful morning, and I put things on edge here. Everyone wondered if I would make it on time, but I squealed into the parking lot in plenty of time. So, but it's good to be here with you today. I did want to also say, let's keep in mind all of those around us who are going through some very difficult times. We have people who are still dealing with Hurricane Harvey, the aftermath of that in terms of flooding and the devastation. Many of us in southern Louisiana know what that's like. Either we were affected or people that we know and care for very close to us were affected. So we know what a difficulty that is. There are also raging wildfires out west. There is the threat of Irma, as you know, and then Jose behind it. So many of us have family and friends. Maybe some of you joining us this morning are from those areas. Please know that you're in our prayers. And, I just want to remind people of the book that prayers are a wonderful thing on behalf of other people, and we should be looking for other ways to help as well, because one thing that I like to remind people, a lot of times prayer is, as they say, all you can do, and that's plenty in some instances, but if you have an opportunity to help someone in ways that are more tangible, such as bringing someone into your home or helping someone who's evacuated one of these troubled areas, or if you're financially able to help in some way, please do, because I've grown to believe over the years that in many ways we can be the answer to someone's prayer. A lot of times we tend to think about it in terms of, God's going to do this and God's going to do that, and those are wonderful thoughts, don't get me wrong. But quite often, God depends on us to be those hands and arms and feet. So think about that. There are a lot of people who are going through difficult times right now. Don't forget them. Now, we are approaching what we call the High Holy Days. The 7th month is the holy month according to the Hebrew calendar. The first day of the 7th month, as you know, is Yom Teruah, the day of the noise making, the day of the blast. It's often called the Feast of Trumpets, and according to traditional Judaism, it is Rosh Hashanah. So we are going to do several events. We intend to do several events and webcast them live from here at the United Israel Center. I have several things in the works. We're hoping to have a sort of a workshop, if you will, if I can coordinate things with a friend of mine, a rabbi from Chabad, who can actually come, and if he has some unfinished shofarot, the ram's horns, we're going to actually, if I can arrange this, we're going to actually make our own shofar. Several of us, hopefully we'll have a few of these to work with, and preferably the kids would be able to do this. But we'll have that workshop if we can pull it off. And then that's going to be ahead of the Yom Teruah service that we do, where we have people making noise and blowing trumpets. Kids like this, adults like this, everybody likes this. I mean, come on, who wouldn't? We're also going to do a special service for Yom HaKippurim, the Day of Atonement. And we are, hopefully, everybody in the local group, get ready for this. We want to build another Suka out here in the front like we did last year and set that up. All the neighbors love it. They drive by and they say, hey, what is that? And they come in and ask me, and then before long I have them saying the sinner's prayer and converting to the Hebrew faith. So that's the goal. It's to draw the people in, and we look forward to that. So we're going to make everything that we do, we're going to make you part of it as best we can. So get ready for the High Holy Days. Watch, and I will be posting things on our Facebook page and on our United Israel site about those upcoming holy convocations, as the King James puts it. I love King James. Now, today, we continue with the narrative in Genesis. We are following the ancient triennial cycle. We are now, today, beginning chapter 38 of Genesis, chapter 38. I've titled this class, see how far ahead of the game I am this week? I've actually titled this class, Judah Went Down. Judah went down, and it's based on the opening words of this particular chapter in Genesis. Now, I realize that this type of study that we're doing is not as preachy as I have been in the past in some regards, but I think it's important that we work through these stories and we really look for insights into what the Torah is saying at each of these places along the way. And this week, just this week while I was studying, I was getting even a deeper appreciation for the text of the Torah than I have ever. And you'll see why. I think some of the insights that are provided in this week's Torah portion will illustrate that. I do want to say that one of the things that happens when you read Genesis 38, let me put it this way. If you read Genesis 37, as we did last week, and you talk about it, you're introduced to what I call the Joseph Saga. So you're immediately brought into the story of Joseph, which is one of my favorites. And then when you get to chapter 38, it almost seems to interrupt the flow. In fact, a lot of commentators point that out. We're talking about Joseph and, the deal where he gets ultimately ends up in Egypt, this evil plot that his brothers did against him, and all those sorts of things. And it ends, chapter 37 ends with Joseph being taken into Egypt. Chapter 38 begins, and it was about this time that Judah went down, and we're going to get into that. But when you read chapter 38, it does seem out of place. But what you'll see is that this was necessary. It's a necessary interruption into the Joseph Saga, because what the Torah wants to do is simultaneously develop two key characters. So while we're developing the character and we're learning about Joseph, we also can't forget that the other most dominant figure in the story of the boys, let's call them the boys, the sons of Israel, the other one is Judah. So what we have to do, and the reason that we have to have chapter 38 in the story of Judah going down and doing what we're going to talk about, is that it demonstrates for us that Judah has got some development to do too. And you will see that because these two figures, Joseph and Judah, have equally significant parts to play, but different roles, right? So we have to bring them up together because Judah and Joseph are the two most prominent and important, both for the present study of the book of Genesis as well as the unfolding significance that leads us into the prophetic unfolding of God's plan. So we've been doing this for weeks now. By studying the patriarchs and the fathers and the ancestral tribal leaders by name, the sons of Israel, we're gaining some insight into what their descendants will be and do in terms of fulfillment of the prophetic unfolding. Now, I want to begin again today in the book of 1 Chronicles. You will hear this probably, I don't want to say every week, but I don't want to not say every week because it's important. 1 Chronicles chapter 5, and I want to begin with verse 1. And it says, "Now the sons of Reuben, the firstborn of Israel, for he was the firstborn, but since he defiled his father's bed," remember that, "his birthright was given to the sons of Joseph, the son of Israel. And not so as to have the birthright attributed to him by genealogy, for Judah prevailed over his brothers, and of him came the chief ruler, though the birthright was Joseph's." So here's what I want you to get, and really, really get this. These two significant, prominent figures, Judah and Joseph. Joseph gets the birthright. Judah, it's through him who comes the chief ruler. All right, so these two, we have to get to know these two very intimately in order to see how this is going to play out. Now, it does come across in the text, and here there's a hint to this. There is sort of a struggle for the supremacy, let's say a place in the chief seats at the family table, right? So it's sort of a struggle going on. We're going to notice some things about these characters. This is why I love this slower pace, because we get to develop, we get to see details about these characters. We already know some things about Joseph. Joseph is this dreamer, right? He has these wonderful dreams, but he doesn't quite have control of his gift yet. At least from my perspective, I think that it would be wise at times for him to sort of hold those, that, don't say everything you think there, Joseph. But he has to learn. He has to hone that. The gift is there. God's given him this gift. Don't know if it's genetic. But we do know his daddy, Jacob, has this gift too. John pointed that out last week in our conversation. But he's got to hone it. Now, what is it that Judah has? We're going to take a real good look at some things about Judah today that I think are going to bear some insight into what we're going to be looking at later. Now, from time to time, I recommend books that I think are really good. And I haven't talked about this book in quite some time. This book here can be purchased at any good bookseller or on Amazon. It's called The Shocking Bible, Volume 1. It's the 5 books of Moses: Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. A new translation with introductions, commentary, and notes by Everett Fox. And this particular translation, first of all, the translation is really good. And I love it because it's literal, and he brings out things based on the linguistics that are really insightful that a lot of other people miss. Now, I also like Friedman, his commentary on the Torah, for the same reason. They don't get into theology so much or parochial comments, but their commentary generally provides us with, like when I read his commentary and his notes, I think, I never noticed that. And such is the case today. I'm going to share with you. I always like to give credit, because otherwise you guys just think I'm brilliant. I'm really not. I just read a lot. So I got some insights from studying Everett Fox, and for that reason, it reminded me of how good this really is. So I don't know what it cost, but if you can find a book, even a used copy of this on Amazon, sometimes they have used copies. I find that sometimes books are a lot like exercise equipment. People get them and they're not like me. They don't mark them and read them. They actually just, use them for pretty places on the wall, on the bookshelf. So if you see one, get one. Everett Fox, 5 books of Moses. And one of the things that Everett Fox points out, based on what I want to talk about today, is he points out that quite often there are recurring themes that show up in these stories. Regardless of who the character is that's being developed, there are similarities that are often brought out, and Fox picks up on a lot of these. And I'll give you a couple of examples. So let's look at quickly in my introductory points. Let's think about Jacob and Joseph. There, in the stories of both, there's a story of sibling hatred or rivalry. Let's call it rivalry, sibling rivalry. Jacob and Esau, right? This sibling rivalry. Joseph and his brothers, see, it's kind of a common theme. Now, you could expand that and say, well, that's just life, Ross. I mean, brothers have conflict. And to some degree, siblings do. But it's a key in understanding the narrative by taking notice of this. There is the exile of the hero. So Jacob is exiled from home, right? He's out of the land of promise. We already know that the land of Canaan, the land of Canaan, is going to be given to the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And then Jacob has to flee for his life. And he spends 20 some odd years away. He comes back, you know the story. Joseph is the next major focus in our reading. He too, sibling rivalry. He too, exiled, see, from Dothan. They load him up with either the Ishmaelites, the Midianites, the Midianites, however you want to look at that, right? There are some textual issues. But he's taken away. He's out of the land of the living, let's say. Notice the consistency there. This story, like so many of the Torah stories, you can read them and miss the strong grip of emotion. You know, think about the emotions, you know, like, for instance, when Jacob and Esau, when Esau comes in and realizes that Jacob has, quote unquote, stolen his blessing, there's weeping and mourning and, you know, this crying and so forth. There's love and passion in these stories. There's hatred. See, don't lose sight of the fact that the writer wants us to feel these emotions. When we talked about Leah, we talked about how she was forlorn because she couldn't Rachel, because she couldn't bear children. We feel when we read about Leah that she doesn't feel loved. So don't just read these stories just to read them and say, oh, I know the story. Feel the story. And these emotions are going to go very, very deep when we get into these stories today. Remember last week when we left off, Jacob is so distraught. He is so mournful over what he thinks is the death of his son that he says, I will go down to Sheol in this state. He says, I'm not going to recover. So the text wants you to feel that, so don't skip that. Now, dreams are going to be a recurring theme. Fox points this out as well. The dreams seem to guide the providence and the way that the story unfolds. You have to think about this. I often tell people, the entirety of the Bible is based on a dream. You can think about it. I mean, it really is. Jacob has this dream, and he's told some things in the dream, and what we lose sight of is a lot of times we think that in antiquity that Jehovah would come and speak to these people like, hey, Sherry, good morning, how are you? It's me. I'm just coming to check on you. But a lot of times the communication comes in the form of a dream, not so different than many of you may have experienced dreams where you feel like God is speaking to you. So don't think so much that, you know, I used to think as a kid, I wish God would, you know, speak to me like, well, you know, how real was it? Well, these were dreams. Think about that. There's often an element, a theme of deception that's brought into these stories. Jacob and Esau, again. There is a disguise, there is a deception, and then there's this theme of reaping what you sow. It occurs over and over and over. How many of you, even if you didn't believe the Bible, would say that's just true? I mean, basically, you know, a lot of times, people call it karma. You know, non-believers would call it karma. Hey, you got that coming. You treat somebody bad, you're going to be treated bad. So people have a realization of this. The writers are showing us these themes as they tell the stories. Now, when we talk about the changing of garments and deception, One thing that I haven't seen Fox note yet, but that is very obvious to me, this depth that we're going in, is to follow the garments. It's almost, I imagine this almost as this great production, like a play. And in the scenes, the main characters are, you know something's coming when there's the discussion of a garment. You know, you ought to be at this place when you see, and Daddy made Joseph a beautiful coat. You ought to go, uh-oh, something's coming with this. In today's story, we also have a garment. Now, last week I made a connection that connects the story of Joseph and the long robe, as Tabor translates it, this kotnot pasim. It only occurs in one other scripture, and that's in, is it 2 Samuel 13 with the story of Tamar and how she is abused. She's raped by her brother. I mean, it's a bad story. But she too has a ketonet pasim. She has this long robe, basically. It's the only other place. And it's interesting that the focus, the connection between Joseph and Tamar is this one garment. Now, I'm going to make one more step from that statement by way of introduction. Last week we pulled in the name Tamar, and this week, in what seems to be an unrelated segment of Scripture, this story about Judah and going down with his Adullamite friend named Chara, and we have a character by the name of Tamar in this story as well. And once again, the story is pulled in. This is a great artistry. It's like a tapestry woven by the writers of Scripture. That it's almost like it says to us, go find these connecting pieces and it will all make sense. So now we're going to pull Tamar, the name, back into our story, and we're going to begin to talk about this interesting segment in the development. Now, at its base level, the stories that we are going through are the stories of brothers. And I want to take that a little bit further because we have to develop the plot. We have to fully understand the development of the plot, because what we're looking for is the development of the character, not just the personality, but their true inner character, to realize that what we need to understand is that what is happening to them is bringing them to the place where one day they can bring salvation. Now, I don't just mean salvation in terms of the continuity of the family unit. I'm talking big. I'm talking macro. What I mean to say is that the character of these brothers, and consequently the character of their descendants, have to be developed because they're responsible for, get this, the salvation of humanity. They have to get to this place. A great example is the sons of Korah. Remember Korah, the great rebel, the one who leads the insurrection against Moses? I mean, he was a pretty bad guy according to the text, but here's something interesting. The text in the book of Numbers tells us that the sons of Korah didn't die. And you know what? They went on to write 11 of the most beautiful psalms. I mean, these are very, very powerful. I read them this week. We were going through some tough times as a family, and I read these psalms, and they're so gripping. So the descendants have learned, and that even comes out in their discussion. In their psalms, they make mention of this. So, we began last week with the Joseph Saga. It's interrupted by the story of Judah, which is what we're going to cover today. There are some details in the story which almost seem insignificant. In fact, I've read it many times and didn't really make a lot of the connections that I see this morning. The reader of the story last week in Genesis 37 got just a taste of Judah's character. Now I'm going to read this to you. Go with me to Genesis 37, verse 26. I want to show you, we're going to follow Judah. We don't know a lot about Judah until this week, but in verse 26, Judah said to his brothers, "What profit is it if we slay our brother and conceal his blood? Come and let us sell him to the Ishmaelites, the Yishmaelim, and let not our hands be upon him, for he is our brother and our flesh." And his brothers hearkened to him. Okay, so I want to talk about that for just a moment. By the way, another brother has already made an attempt to intervene in the plot. It doesn't work. Judah, though, Judah steps in, and he seems to have a plan which is more thorough, more thought out. And he uses logic and reason, and he says, look, let's not kill him. You know, I don't know if Joseph can hear this. I just don't know. We're not told that in the story. But he lays out this plan, and it includes, and let's just sell him. Right? Now, you can think about, and we can interject our own thoughts into what are his motives, but I'm going to caution you beforehand, be careful. Because what we don't know is that. We don't know his motives. For all we know, he's been inspirited to do this. He feels led to do that. We don't know. But we do know that his plan ultimately puts Joseph in the right place, and I think it also saves a deep mark on his own soul. That sounds a little more spiritual than I usually get, but I think had he participated in an evil against Joseph, it would have been something that would have been detrimental to the unfolding of the plan, right? So if you think about it, his plan puts Joseph in the right place, though no one may know it yet, and it sets Judah on a course in the development of his character that we see very plainly in today's chapter. So he says, don't kill him, and it seems that just to save his life may have been all that he could pull off. In other words, you might think, well, wonder what would happen if he would have just said, oh, come on, guys, you know, Joseph, let's just not do anything. Let's not kill him. Let's not sell him. Let's just blow it off. I mean, he's a kid. See, I don't think that would have worked because there's some hatred going on here. The brothers, the other brothers, especially the sons of Zilpah and Bilhah, they want him dead. They're the ones that are like, oh, here comes the dreamer, the Lord of the dreams. Let's just kill him and we'll see what happens to his dream. So you can't go from that hatred to say, I'll just drop it, boys. They want something. They really want blood. But Judah's able to say, look, he's our brother, he's our flesh, let's just sell him. So I begin to see Judah as a very positive figure here. And I just want to state that going into the class today. Remember, again, Reuben has this idea too, and he tries to take charge. But see, Reuben is unstable as water. I think his brothers saw it, his dad certainly saw it. Reuben can't control his own emotions or his desires. And so the brothers don't really look to Reuben for leadership. But something about Judah, he's being developed to be a leader, right? Because the chief ruler is coming from Judah. So I think he probably had that presence. You know, you've been around people, some are not leadership quality. I mean, we just know. Some people have more of a sort of a leadership, a charisma maybe. You're okay following them, right? I think Judah probably has that. So Reuben's plan, you know, was throw him in the pit, and he ends up in this place. It's empty and there's no water. If you would have just followed Reuben's plan, he'd have just died, starved to death, or died of thirst. Judah's plan was specific. Let's get him out of there and sell him. Keeps him alive, puts him in the right place. Keep that in your notes. So, last week we left off. Joseph is alive. He's been sold into Egypt as a slave. There is the hanging over the story of a lie, a deception that is promulgated in blood. You know, they take this coat, which is clearly a representative, a symbol of Joseph's stature maybe, but at least his love that was the father's love towards him, and it's dipped in blood, and so all the brothers go along with this too. So this is like a pact. And they bring this horrible news to Jacob. Now here's what they do. They hold up the bloody coat and they say, "Can you tell us if this is your son's coat or not?" This is cruel. You cannot, can you imagine as a father? You know, we have friends who've recently lost a child. And I think about, the agony, when Jacob sees this, he's crushed. He's devastated. And all the boys are in on this. So don't get me that I'm trying to say some are in. They come into this with a pact. The father, we leave with Joseph is thought of as dead, and the father is mourning, saying that he's inconsolable, right? Now remember last week, Jeremiah 31, the only place that mentions this one who is unconsolable is Jacob, and it deals with Joseph, and then Rachel in Jeremiah 31. Same Hebrew words, only in these two places. It's always about Joseph who brings about this deep mourning. So, as I pointed out last week, the focus has now shifted in our narrative to Joseph, and we have to develop Judah. So I'm going to read to you Genesis chapter 38 from the Transparent English Bible. It's very literal. Most of you know this. If you're new here, read along in any translation, but just recognize that this is very, very literal. Genesis chapter 38. And it was at that time, and Judah went down. See, this is the title of my class today. From with his brothers. And he stretched out unto a man, an Adullamite, and his name was Hira. And Judah saw there the daughter of a man, a Canaanite, his name was Shua, and took her and came toward her. And she became pregnant and brought forth a son, and he called his name Er. She became pregnant still and brought forth a son and called his name Onan. And she added still and brought forth a son and called his name Shelah. And he was in Keziv at her bringing him forth. And Judah took a woman for Er, his firstborn, and her name was Tamar. And Er, the firstborn of Judah, was bad in the eyes of Jehovah, and Jehovah caused him to die. And Judah said to Onan, "Come toward the woman of your brother, and brother-in-law her, and cause to rise seed to your brother." And Onan knew that the seed would not be his, and it was when he came toward the woman of his brother, and he ruined it landward, so as not to give seed to his brother. And it was bad in the eyes of Jehovah what he did, and he caused him also to die. And Judah said to Tamar, his daughter-in-law, "Sit a widow in the house of your father until Shelah, my son, is large." For he said, "Lest he die also like his brothers." And Tamar walked and sat in the house of her father, and the days were abundant. And the daughter of Shua, the woman of Judah, died. And Judah was consoled, and he went to his sheep shears, he and Hira, his fellow, the Adullamite, toward Timnah. And it was told to Tamar, saying, "Look, your father-in-law is going up toward Timnah to shear his flock." And she turned aside the clothing of her widowhood from upon her. Here we go with the garment thing. And covered herself with a veil, and wrapped herself, and sat at the opening of En-Naim, that is, on the way toward Timnah. For she saw that Shelah was large, and she had not been given to him for a woman. And Judah saw her and thought her to be a fornicator, for she had covered her face. And he stretched out toward her, toward the way, and said, "Give note, please, let me come toward you." For he did not know that she was his daughter-in-law. And she said, "What will you give to me that you may come toward me?" And he said, "I will send a kid of the flock, a kid of the goats from the flock." And she said, "Will you give a pledge until you send it?" And he said, "What's the pledge that I will give to you?" And she said, "Your seal, your cord, and your staff that's in your hand." And he said unto her, and came toward her, and she became pregnant by him. And she rose, and she walked, and she turned aside her veil from upon her, and dressed with the clothing of her widowhood. And Judah sent the kid of the goats by the hand of his fellow the Adullamite to take the pledge from the hand of the woman, and he did not find her. Uh-oh. That's not in the text. I just added that for emphasis. And he asked the men of her place, saying, "Where is the set-apart one, she who was in Enaim upon the way?" And they said, "There's not been in this way a set-apart one." And he returned toward Judah and said, "I have not found her." And also the men of the place said, "There's not been, excuse me, in this way a set-apart one." And Judah said, "Let her take them for herself, lest we be shamed. Look, I sent this kid, and you did not find her." And it was after about 3 months, and it was told to Judah, saying, "Tamar, your daughter-in-law, is fornicated. And also, look, she's become pregnant by fornications." Judah said, "Cause her to go out, and let her be burnt." She was caused to go out, and she sent toward her father-in-law, saying, "By a man that to him are these, I am pregnant." And she said, "Recognize, please, to whom the seal and the cords and the staff are these." Now, let me just jump in here for a second. You know this, you hear this phrase, recognize, who are these? You remember what they said when they brought the coat to Jacob? Remember this, you reap what you sow? All right. And Judah recognized and said, "She is just from me, because I did not give her to Shelah my son." And he did not continue still to know her. And it was at the time she was to give birth, look, twins were in her belly. And it was in her bringing forth, and he gave a hand, and midwife took it and bound on his hand a crimson twine, saying, "This one has gone out first." And it was as he was causing his hand to return, and look, his brother went out. And she said, "What? You've burst forth. Upon you is a bursting forth." And she called his name Peretz. And after his brother went out, on whose hand was a crimson twine, and he called his name Zerah. All right. Now, I want to call your attention to something significant so that you carefully pay attention. If you look at the last verse of chapter 37, it says in verse 36, "The Midianim sold him to Egypt, to Potiphar, Pharaoh's chamberlain, a captain of the guard. And it came to pass at that time Judah went down." So here's what I want you to realize. The story's flowing chronologically. Joseph is on his way to Potiphar. He's actually at Potiphar's. And about that time, Judah goes down. Now look ahead with me. Go to chapter 39, verse 1. "And Joseph was brought down to Egypt and Potiphar." You see that? So what I want you to see is that if you took chapter 38 out, just pull it out, you would be perfectly following the narrative. You see what I'm saying? So there's no, the continuity of the story is interrupted. Now let me show you how much it's interrupted. If you read the last verse of 37, the first verse of 39, you can take 38, and I don't encourage you to do this, but you could cut it out and just read it. You'd get the whole story of Joseph. Here's what you wouldn't get. You wouldn't get Judah's character being developed. Now, the chronological flow of the narrative is greatly interrupted, because what we get in chapter 38 is a wide time frame. So we're going to work through this, and I want you to pay close attention. I'm just going to kind of work through the story. So Judah, first of all, I want to bring up that Judah, at this time, it says he goes down away from his brother, away from his brothers. Now, I see in this, and I'm not trying to get too interpretive, I'm not trying to veer from the text. We know he went away from them physically, geographically, you might say. He goes away from them. But what I want to tell you is I think that this implies more than geography. Okay? I think that he gets away from them in a couple of significant ways. One, he's already started to separate from them in the last chapter when he opposed the plan to kill him and came up with an alternative. Now he's going down. I think he's going to get a lot of development in this chapter, as we'll see. So it seems to indicate this development that's going on. So what did we learn about Judah this week? Now, Fox brings up a lot of linguistic things and cognates and how words are similar and might hint at. You know, like the writer might be hinting at something else. So, in fact, the Arabic word, which Arabic is very similar to Hebrew, the Semitic language, the word adulah means to turn aside. So it's almost like he gets away from his brothers and he turns away. It indicates a departure. Now, Hira, the Adullamite, is really a guy, right? He's a character in the story. But the story, according to Fox, might hint at or allude to Judah departing slightly from the path, if you will. And Judah, by the way, according to the story, when he's with his friend, he meets a good Canaanite girl. See? You see how we read over this? Judah, you might say, well, Judah, you know, Mom and Dad want you to marry a good Jewish girl. But Judah doesn't marry a good Israelite girl, right? He marries a Canaanite. And the daughter of a man named Shua. And he has 3 sons. And the sons' names are Onan, and Shelah. All right, these good little part Judah, part Canaanite kids. And these kids grow up. Here's a piece I want you to understand. End of 37, beginning of 39, it's like these kids in this story have already been, first of all, his wife, Judah, and his woman have had 3 kids, and they're grown up. You see, let's say they married early. We're talking at least 2 decades in chapter 38. Now, in 2 decades, we can really develop some character here with Judah, and that's what we're going to do. So, get that. The first one, Judah finds a wife for his firstborn son, and this boy is bad. In fact, it says, did bad in the eyes of Jehovah. Now, that exact phrase, did bad in the eyes of Jehovah, just that phrase. Now, there are variations of it that occur quite more frequently, but the phrase, did bad in the eyes of Jehovah, is used 55 times in Scripture. This is good trivia stuff. I mean, if you ever get caught in a trivia game and somebody says, how many times does it say did bad? You can say 55 and win the prize. So keep track of these things. These are nuggets. These are free, by the way. So it generally indicates a great departure from the order which has been laid forth by Jehovah. The kings sometimes it'll say, and so did bad in the eyes of Jehovah, not according to David his father or whatever. But you get this impression that Jehovah is watching, right? And that when you do bad in the eyes of Jehovah, the results are always bad. Pretty simple stuff. All right. Now, the first time that this phrase is used is here with Judah's sons. Now, I want to pull the two things I just said together. Here's what I mean. It's through Judah that the ruler is going to come. And here, at the very first instance, we read two times in this story, Genesis 38, about Judah, about his sons doing bad in the eyes of Jehovah. Now, I just think it's interesting that this phrase is most often used in talking about descendants of Judah. But that's just something you can follow up on with more study. We don't know what Er did. We don't know what specifically was bad in the eyes of Jehovah. We just know that it was. It just says it was bad. And so Jehovah kills him, or literally in the Hebrew, causes him to die. So I think as you follow this through, you're going to pick up on a couple of things. So for instance, imagine, we just read through this. He did bad and he's caused to die. Stop for a second. Judah just lost a son, his firstborn. He's in agony. See, we just read over that like it. Pause. Now, evidently, we know later in Hebrew society, based on Deuteronomy 25, we'll read that in just a moment, that there is what is referred to in English as the levirate marriage, where if a brother dies and hasn't had seed, that the next brother takes the woman and brings her in so that she can have seed, and that child is named for the brother so that there's continuity of that family and you don't lose that place, right? So now this legislative piece has not been communicated to us, but it was evidently already a practice, and what's recorded in Deuteronomy is a later recording of an ancient practice. So let's look at that. Please go with me to Deuteronomy 25. Deuteronomy 25, and I want to read verses 5 through 10. Deuteronomy 25, 5 through 10. If brothers dwell together and one of them die and have no child, the wife of the dead shall not marry abroad to a stranger. See, this is part of the key. You don't go outside. Her husband's brother shall go into her and take her to him to wife and perform the duty of a husband's brother to her. And it shall be that the firstborn which she bears shall succeed in the name of his brother who is dead, that his name be not wiped out in Israel. And if the man like not to take his brother's wife, then let his brother's wife go up to the gate of the elders and say, my husband's brother refuses to raise up to his brother a name in Israel. He will not perform the duty of a husband's brother. Then the elders of his city shall call him, speak to him, and shall stand and say, I do not wish to take her. Then shall his brother's wife approach him in the presence of the elders, loose his shoe from off his foot, and spit in his face, and shall answer and say, thus shall it be done to the man that will not build up his brother's house. And his name shall be called in Israel the house of him that had his shoe loosed. All right? So this is sort of a shameful thing. If you do not, you can choose not to do it. But according to this, you got to go through some humiliation right here. You will then be called, there goes the guy who would not raise up seed in his brother's stead. You know, it's like a stigma. It's pretty bad, okay? So, now, we don't really have a lot of like I said, this Torah piece that I just read in Deuteronomy is not mentioned, but Judah knows of something like this. All right? So, I want you to go with me because I want to pull Ruth in. and I want to talk about that a little bit. Go with me to the book of Ruth, chapter 1. Chapter 1, verse 11. And Naomi said, "Turn back, my daughters. Why will you go with me? Are there yet any more sons in my womb that they may be your husbands? Turn back, my daughters. Go your way, for I am too old to have a husband. If I should say I have hope, even if I should have a husband tonight and should bear sons, would you tarry for them till they were grown? Would you for them refrain from having husbands? No." Right? So then here's the point. The reason I brought that in. Make sure my mic isn't, I think I pulled it a little bit. So here's what I want you to see. Her point is, your husband's just died. So there's no one to take. In other words, I don't have any more sons, which according to this levirate practice would fill in. She says, if I had a husband tonight, would you wait then for them to grow? Go, just go. See, but this practice. Now, we're going to come back to Ruth later in our teaching today. Well, let's go ahead and read verse 10 of chapter 4 in Ruth. But don't get ahead, don't read before, just verse 10. You better mind. Moreover, Ruth 4:10, moreover, Ruth the Moabite, the wife of Machlon, have I acquired as my wife, to raise up the name of the dead upon his inheritance, that the name of the dead be not cut off from among his brethren and from the gate of his place. And you are witnesses this day. So this is Boaz speaking. Now, technically, according to the Torah, this deals with the brother. Now, Boaz is not the brother in this case. So some have associated what he's referring to as a connecting piece with Leviticus 25:25 and rules of inheritance. But what I want you to get is there is this idea in antiquity that is prevailing, and it comes across in our Genesis 38 text. If you die and you don't have seed, the brother's got to step in. Okay, so this sets the stage for something, and it's really going to be a key in the development of Judah's character. So, son number 2, Judah loses heir. He gives the second son to this woman, Tamar. This son's name is Onan. Onan, I guess, he pretends to follow through, so he takes her to be his woman, but he doesn't give her seed. And because of that, this too was called bad in the eyes of Jehovah. So one of them, we don't know what he did. The second one, we know that he knew what to do and he didn't do it. Now he too dies. Pause. Don't just read over that. Judah has now lost not one son, but 2. Now, this is in a short period of time. I don't know how many times I've read this, and it's obvious that Judah loses a son. He loses another, and you just keep reading. Because the whole time I've been thinking, man, this is so interruptive. It sort of, it kind of cuts through I don't wonder why this is here. Hello. It's here to show us something about Judah. Okay. Judah's learning something that's going to be very much a part of what is to follow in our story. Let me ask you this. Do we think now that perhaps Judah can somehow relate to Jacob in a way that none of the other brothers can? he now understands that Jacob, in his inconsolable place, because he lost a son. Judah now, none of the other brothers know this, as far as we know, according to the text. Judah's the only one who can somehow now relate to the father through loss. I want you to look. I'm going to prove this. Go with me to Genesis 42. We're looking ahead a little bit. So I want you to remember this for today and then forget it, because we're going to come back to it. I might want to do this again in another class, so you can't remember it. Chapter 42, verse 37, I think. All right, so now let me give you the context. They're talking to Dad, Jacob, about Benjamin, right? And so they've been told, you got to bring the boy with you when you come or whatever. Remember, Jacob's like, why in the world would you even tell him you had another brother? I mean, what? You didn't even have to tell him that. You talk too much, right? I'm paraphrasing. It's not a literal translation. But look at verse 37. So Reuben speaks up to his father. Now remember, Reuben has always, here's the thing about Reuben's character. I love character development in the Torah. Here's Reuben's. He lost his place. He's forever. When you meet Reuben, his actions are guided by this. He wants his father to love him again. So he means well when he says this. Watch this. Reuben, verse 37, spoke to his father, saying, kill my two sons, if I bring him not to you. Deliver him into my hand, and I will bring him back to you. In other words, let me take Benjamin. You can trust me. If I don't, you can kill my two boys. That's a bold statement. And he may mean it. I'm not saying he doesn't. He's desperate to get Daddy's affection. But you know what? He really can't grasp what he just said, because he has no experience. But Jacob knows he can't relate. So look at the next verse. And he said, my son will not go down with you, for his brother is dead, and he is left alone. If mischief befall him by the way in which you go, then you'll bring my gray hairs with sorrow to Sheol. No, he's not going with you. No dice. Now, but one of the brothers is able to convince Dad he can go with me. Who would that be? And why? Okay, so go to chapter 43, and I want to read verse 8 through 11. And Judah said to Israel his father, send the lad with me, and we will arise and go, that we may live and not die. See the difference in the language? You see, remember, Reuben's like, you can kill my two boys. Judah would never say that. He's still crushed. And not die, both we and you and also our little ones. I will be surety for him. Of my hand shall you require him. If I bring him not to you and set him before you, then I shall have sinned to you forever. For if we had not lingered, surely now we had returned the second time. In other words, you're delaying the decision. Let me bring him. I guarantee you, my life is a guarantee. And their father Israel said to them, if it must be so now, do this. Take the best fruits of the land in your vessels and go, and so forth. So you know what? Judah is trusted of the father in a way that the others aren't, because he knows. Jacob knows that Judah knows what it's like to lose a son. Not once, but twice. See? Jacob had said, I lost one, and this would be two, and I can't handle it. And Judah steps up and he says, I have handled it. Now, I think this is remarkable. I think it's powerful, I think it provides insight. I think we get to look at how Judah is able, through his suffering and through the things that he's experienced, to do things and be trusted of the Father in ways that no other boy can. All right, you get the point. All right. So, by the way, in our story back in chapter 38, Judah's wife also passes away. He's lost 2 sons, and the daughter of Shua, his woman, has passed away. Judah knows suffering like no one else. Now it says after the initial grief, basically. So once Judah is able to breathe again. Now we get the impression, I'm assuming, based on my reading of the text and thinking about the chronology, no real indicator here, I'm assuming we're talking about 2 decades. But let's say, and this, please work with me, this is just speculation. Within a period of about 5 years, Judah loses 2 boys and a wife. He's left with only Shelah. Now, he doesn't want to give her to Tamar. Could you understand that? I mean, this is bad. He's had 2 sons that died with this woman. She's snake bit, right? I mean, we would say something like that. She's bad luck. She's a black widow, whatever you call it. It's not a good thing. So he delays in giving her up. Now, she knows this is going on, and she may even understand why. She's probably thinking, I know what you're thinking, but the rule says you got another boy. Judah doesn't do it. So he goes down, and he's going down. Now, he's not married. His woman is dead. He goes down, so let's not all point the finger and wag the tail at Judah. But he does go down. He's probably a lonely man. He's clearly broken. He's looking for affection, maybe. Again, I'm trying to get into the character here. He longs for touch, and he sees a woman that he thinks is a set-apart one who is devoted to prostitution, is the way we understand this. And he goes into her. Now, back it up just a minute. Tamar puts this together. She wants the boy that's hers. By the law, she wants him. She wants Shelah. So she puts together this plot. Somebody said, hey, your father-in-law is going to Timnah to do the sheep. And she's like, oh, I got this. So she takes off her widow garment. She puts a veil over her face. She dresses like a prostitute or whatever, which probably look different than the prostitutes you might see today, but I don't know. I don't know. I don't know enough about this. I need to stop. But he sees her, thinks she's a prostitute, goes in. She gets pregnant. Now, garments to deceive. It's one of the plot themes. You got to keep an eye on this. Now, he doesn't know who she is. He asks her, he makes an offer for her. He said, look, I'll give you a sheep for this. And but I don't have it with me. So she's like, well, what am I going to get until you send that sheep? Because otherwise he might do his business and then run. So she wants to make sure she gets the sheep. So he says, look, what do you think? And she said, well, let me have your signet, your seal, the cord, and your staff. And then once you send the sheep, we'll work out a deal. So you know the story. Now, work with me here too, because I'm looking at the story and I'm thinking about Judah and I'm thinking about prophecy. In Genesis chapter 49:10, in a prophecy by Jacob about Judah, it says that the scepter will depart. All right, look with me. Now, Now, some might say, I don't know, you're stretching that a little bit too far. I'm going to pick this up again when we get to Genesis 49. For right now, I just want to plant a thought. Chapter 49, verse 10, this is the prophecy, or a part of the prophecy by Jacob about Judah. And it says, the staff will not depart from Judah, nor the scepter from between his feet. Now, the next phrase is debated. In Hebrew, it's ad ki yavo Shiloh. It's translated variously. Until he comes to Shiloh, or until Shiloh comes. Or you're probably all looking at different translations now. Or some translations will say, until it comes to whose it is. Or however you say that grammatically correct in English. In other words, the scepter is not going to depart from Judah, this staff, until the right time. But it will depart, indicating something is going on. Now, we'll tell you that the staff that he gives to Tamar, it's a different word in Hebrew than here where it talks about the scepter will not depart. But the two words are very related, and they often point to the same type of object. So in my mind, I'm thinking of my staff go. What y'all do with my staff? So I always do this to Bridget. Where'd you put that? She said, it's right there where you put it. So this is like a staff. It can be called a couple of different words in Hebrew, but these two words are different in Genesis 38 and in Genesis 49. But this is the image my mind sees when I read either of these words. So if you don't want to connect Genesis 38 and the handing away of the staff with Genesis 49 and the scepter departing from Judah, I'm okay with that because this is just an idea that I'm working on. But it would look like in either of these passages like this, handing away a staff. Okay? So you may not agree with the interpretation, but at least understand what I'm trying to point out. There is a handing of the staff. Now, so Judah gets ready to pay up. Well, why? Well, you could say a whole bunch of things. At the very least, he wants his stuff back. But he could be just very honest and wants to pay what he owes. I think that's it. But he also wants his stuff back. So he sends his friend, his good trusted buddy, and Judah finds out we got a problem. Because the friend can't find, everybody, he's asking, hey, where'd that prostitute go? You know the prostitute? And they're like, ain't no prostitute here. No, you know, the one that, So he goes back and he tells Judah, and Judah's very concerned. Judah said, well, this is going to be a shame. This is going to be embarrassment. I'm going to be the laughing stock. Just let her keep it. We'll just be quiet. That's the only thing you can do. He's just hoping that, you know, somehow this doesn't make the papers. Well, guess what? So word gets back to Judah. The word gets back to Judah that your daughter-in-law, I can almost picture the way this goes down. Judah, Tamar is pregnant. She's what? She's a widow. She's mourning the death of my son, and she's you know, this is bad. Bring her out and get her. We're going to burn her. That's what he says. Now, they do. They bring her out. And she brings with her a seal, a cord, and a staff. And on her way to the pit, she says, anybody recognize these? Now, what does Judah do right then? He gets a good dose of, you are the man. Remember the story, David and Nathan? Nathan tells this horrible story. It's just like the news here. to David's ancestor. I make a connection here when the story looks like David and Bathsheba and Judah and Tamar. There is a connection here, right, to me. He too gets a parable. Yeah, there's someone came into town and left this nice seal and a cord and a staff, and he immediately says, she's more just than I am. He's remorseful. He knows. Again, his character is developed. Because immediately he recognizes that he should have given his other son, despite what's happened before. Rule's a rule, baby. And his descendants are going to be rulers who are expected to follow the Torah. In fact, Deuteronomy 17 says they are to write a copy of it, read it daily, right? So he's got to follow this. Now, again, this is just one other step. So Tamar gives birth to twins. Imagine this. Zerah puts his hand out, and the midwife puts a scarlet thread, but he pulls his hand back, and another baby, Zerah, Peretz, comes out. Now, all of these details are important. I want you to go back with me to Ruth chapter 4. Ruth chapter 4. I am having a lot of fun with this class because I think this is insightful here. Look at chapter 4. I'm going to read verses 7 through 11. Ruth chapter 4, beginning in verse 7. It says, "Now, this was the custom in former time in Israel concerning redeeming and concerning exchanging. To confirm all manner of transactions, a man pulled off his shoe and gave it to his neighbor, and this was the manner of attesting in Israel." You get the connection here. Now, some would argue this isn't levirate, but it is related, okay, at least. "Therefore, the kinsman said to Boaz, 'Buy it for yourself,' and he drew off his shoe. And Boaz said to the elders and to all the people, 'You are witnesses this day that I have bought all that is Elimelech's and all that was Kilion's and Mahlon's from the hand of Naomi. Moreover, Ruth, the Moabite, the wife of Mahlon, have I acquired as my wife, to raise up the name of the dead upon his inheritance, that the name of the dead be not cut off from among his brethren and from the gate of his place. You are witnesses this day,' and all the people that were in the gate, and the elders said, 'We are witnesses. The Lord, Yehovah, make this woman,'" make sure I'm not reading ahead too much, "'that is come into your house like Rachel and Leah, which did build the house of Israel.'" Okay, stop there for just a minute. Notice the idea of removing the shoe, okay? Now, look at the next phrase. "And be prosperous in Ephratah, and be famous in Beit Lechem. And let your house be like the house of Peretz, whom Tamar bore to Judah, of the seed which Jehovah shall give thee of this woman." Now, it says, "Be prosperous in Ephratah and be famous in Beit Lechem." Remember when we were in Genesis 35 and Rachel dies and she's buried in Beit Lechem, Ephratah. And so we talked about whether this was a place or a family line. And then we went to Micah chapter 5, and it says, "But you, Beit Lechem Ephratah, though you are small among the clans of Judah, yet out of you shall come forth to me one who is to be ruler in Israel. His goings forth are from antiquity," from, Now, here we go again. We're talking about, in Ruth, this blessing about Beit Lechem and Ephratah, but it's talking about a family. Now, we didn't read this when we did this before. I was saving it for now. So, If you go back to verse 12 of Ruth chapter 4, let your house be like the house of Peretz, whom Tamar bore to Judah, of the seed which Jehovah shall give thee of this woman. So Boaz took Ruth, and she was his wife, and he went into her, and Jehovah gave her conception, and she bore a son. And the women said to Naomi, Blessed is Jehovah, who has not left you this day without a redeemer, that his name may be famous in Israel, and he shall be to thee a restorer of your life and a nourisher of your old age. For your daughter-in-law, whom loves you, who is better to thee than 7 sons, she has borne him. Naomi took the child, laid it in her bosom, and became nurse to it. And the women, her neighbors, gave it a name, saying, There is a son born to Naomi, and they call his name Ovid. He's the father of Yishai, or Jesse, the father of David. Now listen to this. These are the generations of Peretz. This is our Peretz. Peretz begot Hetzron, Hetzron begot Ram, Ram begot Aminadab, Aminadab begot Nachshon, Nachshon begot Salma, Salma begot Boaz, Boaz begot Ovid, Ovid begot Jesse, Jesse begot David. Now, that's the way the book of Ruth ends. What we see is that 1 Chronicles 5 says Joseph gets the birthright, Judah's got the rulers. We have to know, how do we get from Judah to the rulers? Well, it's through the story of Judah. Judah's descendants, through Tamar, bring about this line of David. Now, it's interesting if you look at the people that God uses to bring about his plan. How many of them are perfect? Like when we read their stories, we're like, you got to be kidding me. Judah went down, because you can think, Judah goes down, and he's like, hubba, hubba, But, we think about in terms of, imagine if you saw these stories in the newspaper. You'd be like, oh, shame, shame. But see, God is using all of these interesting stories in these narratives as unfolding and so forth. The detail of Judah going down, which on the surface seems to interrupt the narrative flow of the Joseph Saga, listen, is perfectly and purposefully placed in the narrative. It's there for a reason. It's not accidental. It's there for the right reason. And it shows us the development of Judah's character, preparing us for what is to come. Judah has already saved Joseph once. He really has. If it wasn't for Judah's idea and his charisma, the boys would have killed him. Judah has saved Joseph once. Remember that. But it's only as a result of living through the agony and hardship and loss that we read about in chapter 38 is Judah ever really developed, and it's only through the things that he suffers that he will finally understand the heart of the Father. I want you to think about the way I'm saying this. Judah, the character, the personality, think of Judah in terms of the Jewish people. The things that they've suffered, the things that Judah suffers, point to what the descendants go through in a way. I'm just saying, sort of as if you point towards something. Only now in the story is he truly equipped to facilitate a reunion working with Joseph. Judah can't do it alone. Joseph won't be able to do it alone. You're going to see the beautiful coming together of these two that will bring about the greatest reunion in all of biblical literature in the Torah, but it's going to point to the greatest reunion that will ever be. Their character has to be developed. He had to come to this place in order to bring about his true destiny. In Genesis 49 it says, Ad ki yavo Shiloh. I wrote this down in my notes. Ad ki yavo shelah. Very similar in spelling in Hebrew, but I'm using it to make a point. Judah had to come to the place where all he had left was Shelah, his son. 2 other sons had passed, his woman had died. Once he got to that place, and he hands over the scepter, only then has his character matured enough for us to begin the story again. You see, the birthright is Joseph's, but Judah, we're told, grew strong among his brothers. And a Nagid, it says, a prince, a ruler, will come from him. Now, next week, we're going to pick up the story where Joseph arrives in Egypt. It's like we don't even know these 20-some-odd years that have just passed. Had you ever noticed that this is like a 20-year period just inserted into the flow? It demonstrates for us that we've got to see things. This is the only way to do it. You can't make the book three-dimensional unless you do it like this. Different characters are being developed and different plots are being enacted so that we come together for the big show. We're going to go back in time next week, and you're not going to know all these things. You're going to know them, but I don't want you to know them. I want you to think. As far as we know, Joseph goes into Egypt. This is before Judah's pain. It's before Judah has lost 2 sons and a woman. And we're going to pick back up and we're going to learn how Joseph's character is being developed. Both are necessary, and listen to me, both Judah and Joseph learn through the things that they suffer, and so do we. Shabbat Shalom. We're going to take a break, and we'll be back shortly for a dialogue.